So hello everyone. We're here again with a video for Amsterdam Fintech Week. And as you know, we're talking to all our partners, friends, family, and so on about what's going on, what's happened this year, why parties are involved, and of course, get to know all the participants a little bit better. And one of our partners this year, a new player into the market to a large extent, was Plaid. And we were very happy that this large US household name almost was actually dropping into Europe and was part of Amsterdam Fintech Week as well. And with us today is Martijn Bos, Policy Officer at Plaid. Great that you're here, Martijn.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Of course, we already have a long history together, and it's great, therefore, to actually be able to speak to you again, also in your new role at Plaid. And I think it's really exciting to see such a big player come to Europe and finding their way from the American market into Europe. So I'm really curious to talk to you about that and how you see your role in the European ecosystem. Yeah, maybe it's good to start with just for the people that don't know Plaid just yet. What does Plaid do? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Hopefully that introduction will become superfluous at some stage when we do become a household name here too. But for now, I'm happy to do that. So we're an open banking service provider. We facilitate the data connection between a current account and, for instance, a fintech app that allows an end user more insights into their financial lives. So basically what in Europe would be called a TPP. /data aggregator. And so we've been doing that successfully for almost a decade in the US and have recently moved over to the UK and Amsterdam.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting, right? So I think it's something that enables completely new solutions for consumers and businesses to be created based on financial data.
Absolutely.
I think it's really interesting that in the US that evolved actually out of the market rather than out of the regulations. But it also gives a bit of a different perspective for you, I think, to work with. How did that go so far?
I mean, so for me personally, my background in fintech has always been in a European space, especially around, if you look at the work that Plaid does. So that's all governed by the Second Payment Services Directive here in the EU. And as you mentioned, in the US, that is all market-led as well. So, and there's very little regulation on how you approach that data. Obviously, there's strict self-governance there. We do our best to ensure privacy and safety of all the data that we handle as well. But, that's the law here. So by default, the products that we offer as a proprietary service in the US exist by virtue of the law in Europe. So we had to sort of pivot and look at how can we rebundle those services and look at how do we fall within the ambit of what is considered an account information service here in Europe? How do we change the way that we initiate a payment so that we fall within the regulation of a payment initiation service? So those things were the initial things that we started out doing when we landed here, and that's sort of been done successfully. I would say we're 98% there. I think we've got our licenses in the UK and in the Netherlands, and we're really starting to scale up from a commercial perspective as well. So that's sort of the genesis story of Plaid in Europe.
Yeah, quite an interesting one. And I think you really have to sort of discover, indeed, especially to work with the regulatory field. Do you also see that there's, you could also think about, for example, a cultural difference. Is there anything, do you see that there's translation that needs to be made there as well?
Definitely. I think the way that customers in general, and especially in the financial sector, are approached in the United States, and the way that customers react to the financial sector is much different than in Europe. We do see in Europe that people are a little bit more hesitant to share their data as openly, which might be a little bit counterintuitive, considering that we've got quite advanced legislation around that, and that the Commission really has made that one of their pivotal work pieces in the last few years. So really building the trust in using data aggregators and TPPs when it comes to managing your financial life. I'm sure you have, you see that all the time when you work with PFMs who are trying to get connections from banks, and really which is all centered around the user permission model, which is the same in the United States, but we see that is granted a little bit more easily there. I think people see the value in that much more quickly. And are maybe just culturally a little bit more likely to try something new more quickly than what we see in Europe, although we do see our uptake growing as well, especially in the e-commerce space. So as horrible as the whole pandemic has been, obviously, we do see that has been a huge boost for growth in terms of e-commerce, and especially around payment initiation services. And we don't expect that to slow down post-pandemic either.
No, I think indeed as well. I think you see a big rise in digital adoption of the past period, and I think indeed that people are not going back to the normal just like that and back to non-digital. I would say, and I do concur to what you say about about how hesitant people might be, but I think it's really also about the horror stories about privacy that I think are being shared maybe more in the European context than in the US.
No, for sure. But, we see that's a double-edged sword for us, because we work very hard to maintain that privacy and that data security, and a few stories that are pushed at a European level can set us back months or years in terms of consumer trust that we work very hard to achieve and maintain. And that's something that we're actively looking to find a balance in as well, and hope to be able to contribute to the public discourse on that.
No, and I think that's also highly needed, because I think that these horror stories are still fantasy stories mostly, rather than actual breaches and security issues. So it's and that's, I think, where also sort of we hope to play a role as well, to team up with players like Plaid to together share the story about how to make the right conscious decisions about which data to share, how to share it, and how to validate, for example, counterparties you work with, but not to be hesitant without any cause.
No, exactly, and that's exactly why I was so adamant that we would join Holland Fintech, is just provide that platform for public-private discourse around all these sort of market-led issues that we can feed back into regulators or other public bodies in a very constructive way, so that we're all aligned with each other. And that's, I think, something that is a key value for us, especially when you look at ecosystem players like Holland Fintech.
No, exactly. So I think that's what we hope to do, and also that's where, for example, Amsterdam Fintech Week comes in, right? Where we really hope to concentrate all of that into one week, where we bring all the players together, including regulators, policymakers, and all the other actors to really make this journey together, to learn where do we stand at the moment, who's working on what, and how can we learn from that. How was that for you?
I mean, it was a great week. So I caught a couple of the sessions, and we were able to join the opening session. My colleague Dan spoke on that panel, so that was a highlight for us to be able to speak right after the Queen. So congratulations on having a high-level speaker opening such an important week. So I think for me, obviously, my background initially in financial services was in financial inclusion. So I sort of try to find a way to tie everything back to that. And I think as a sector, and when you look at open banking, that's sort of our core purpose to begin with. Maybe not in the initial access to a bank account phase, but really in a way to help understand your financial life, to help the way that you make decisions for yourself and your family, to understand your own behavior in a way that you probably wouldn't if you weren't nudged or pinged or given oversight by a fintech that's able to do that for you. And I heard a lot of those conversations center around that week, and I was quite happy to hear that. So I think we're moving in the right direction, also ethically. As a business.
I think it's definitely an interesting comment that you make, because I also see that the industry is maturing from that perspective, from let's say just being able to enter the industry with new ideas and new technologies, to be actually becoming a bit more like an established ecosystem that also has to care much more about the total impact on society. And I think in general, I think the societal perspective becomes much more important than any economical discussion these days. So it's really, really relevant. It's really nice that you can contribute there.
And the I think as a sector, our proof of concept is getting stronger and stronger, right? And what we're also seeing when you look at the broader fintech space, you're looking at you first saw the unbundling of services from banks, and now you're seeing the rebundling of services within fintechs, right? So it's sort of a whole ecosystem shift that we're like watching, develop, and we're really happy to be a part of. And especially when we have so much experience in other markets to sort of help apply that here and maybe help accelerate the uptake in Europe in places where that's a little bit behind. So that's a key focus for us.
No, that's definitely. I think that's a really nice goal, and we're also really curious to learn from your experience, indeed, in the US in this sense, and hope that to have interesting conversations about where the market might be moving.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you look at sort of the ecosystem, what kind of parties are you generally looking for to collaborate with? Right. So, where do you see the biggest potential?
So we actually have a really wide range of customers that we work with. So the smallest being 1 or 2 people startups to sort of like almost enterprise level. Yep. Basically, what we want to do is facilitate the end user in an abstract way. So someone with a bank account with financial data that they want to exploit in their own way, we want to just be able to provide that link to whatever service they might choose. Obviously, there are certain industries that we don't engage in, and we make sure that from an ethical and business perspective, everything is well taken care of before we onboard that client. But we don't really have one set type of customer. So anyone who is really looking to grow their business, we can help connect to thousands of banks and other financial institutions, right? So we're kind of an alternative network in that sense, to facilitate both payment initiation as well as account information services. And how that looks is completely up to the customer.
And do you then also, because it sounds a bit like a utility almost, right? So the connectivity between everything, is it also how you sort of see the evolution going forward?
Yes, especially when you're looking at the way that open banking has developed, and we're a few years on from those lessons, and I believe in 2022 the Commission will come out with an open finance a framework. Yep. So when you look at the role of TPPs or aggregators, or we're not sure yet if we will be considered a data intermediary for those purposes, because we're excluded under certain definitions as an AISP. But if that does happen, so our role in facilitating the reciprocal flow of data from very many different sources that can help bring out new conclusions and extrapolations for financial services end users. Even though we don't engage with them personally, we can help facilitate those flows go from A to B and B to A. So right now, what we're really seeing is that the end client will permission the bank to share the data with a third party, and we facilitate that flow. But we don't really see that data coming back from that fintech to the bank that the bank can do something with, right? So in order for that ecosystem to work a little bit more inclusively, I think that's a role we see for ourselves to facilitate that.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting indeed, because I think that this is where you see still quite some resistance also in the banking world towards the way PSD2 enforces this data sharing.
Correct.
Because it's a one-way street, and indeed you just have to comply. And no payment is following your services.
Exactly.
And I think, let's say, we saw some interesting experiments there, for example, as well, with also some parties actually explicitly saying, "Now we'll start paying for it because we believe it needs to be reciprocal, and we want banks to do a good job, and to be able to do a good job, they need to get paid for it." It's interesting, I think, how that market will evolve. What are you particularly looking out for from that perspective?
I think for us, our relationship with banks is very important, especially looking at coming from the US background, where we have to have direct access agreements with each individual bank. So we really need to understand their core drivers, and there's a whole motivational process that goes on behind that to help banks understand why this is important for their customers, because this is customer driven at the end of the day, and people want to use data that's theirs, that just happens to be stored in a bank. So that's sort of the starting point. And in Europe, that's enforced by law, and we do see in other jurisdictions, for instance, in the United Kingdom, some premium APIs that are being developed, so that will exist alongside the government mandated API. And then if you want better functionality, you need to pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, if you're looking at the long term, I think you don't need to be paying for every time someone fetches data from you as a bank. You need to be getting paid in the insights that you receive back from that fintech, right? So that data exchange and that reciprocity is the important key there for us, I think. And that's also what we would like to facilitate going forward, instead of looking at the paid models that that just remain very transactional.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting development, and definitely worthwhile putting that on the agenda for next year's Fintech Week.
We'd love to. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's because I think indeed that you would want banks also to get smarter from the way the data is being used, to actually not completely exclude them from the equation, and let them also be able to compete, I think, at that level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's really great. And so I think, let's say, I think one of the other challenges I can imagine is sort of around the personal data management, right? I think there's a lot of debates going on about self-sovereign identity, and GDPR in the European context is really a good step up to guard privacy.
Yeah. Very important.
Where do you see that going? Because I think that's also one of the core capabilities that Plaid has, right?
Yeah, indeed. So, and then you're right, but obviously at the core is exactly what you mentioned before, is the self-sovereignty when it comes to where your data goes, who holds your data, how you have that data transferred, and that's something that will never change. So this user permission model is something that we will stick with very firmly, and something that obviously can't change even if we wanted it to, which we don't. But we do see, if you look at data portability and EU digital IDs and how things like that can work together to provide, for instance, a dashboard. So we've developed a dashboard called Plaid Portal, which allows a user to look over all the connections that they have with their bank account and the third party that they've permission to do that, and then they can actually control the allowance of that data sharing from that portal directly, and really remain in the driver's seat there. So those are the type of things that we're doing to ensure that the way that we engage with personal data stays really much centered around the end user without engaging with them directly. Okay,
yeah, I'm also very interested in that, because I think indeed, let's say the thoughts behind how you deal with personal data are all there, but I think the tools are still very, very early on and still being developed, and that's why I think still a lot of people don't feel in control just yet. But so I believe that these kind of tools are really helpful to get that activity going and make people more comfortable.
Good to hear. We agree. So we've been building them.
Well, I think it's really been great to talk to you, Martijn. I think we're very much looking forward to keep on working with Plaid as Holland Fintech. And of course, look forward to involve you again for the next Amsterdam Fintech Week next year.
Okay, well, likewise. Thank you for including us and allowing us this follow-up opportunity to share some more of our thoughts.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very nice to be able to have you here. And let's catch up soon. And for everyone who's listened in, thank you very much for joining. And let us know if you'd like to know more about Plaid, because we're happy to connect you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, Don.